All
Hello.
right. Hello there.
I'm just spamming out here, trying to get more than one viewer to watch us. How you doing today?
Good, good. How was your Canada day?
Pretty good. So I'm learning that in the US, the way to tell if you had a good vacation was to do this. So yeah, do you finger check? Do you have all your fingers?
Especially on on days like that where there are a lot of potential for fireworks,
Right.
for firecrackers. Yeah.
And I'm also hearing that maybe you may not be involved. You could be at a park or something like that, and people could just be setting off fireworks
Yeah.
without necessarily understanding how they work and shooting them at you out of like
Right.
mortars. Things are serious in the U.S.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing.
Well, they are illegal to to own, I think to own and to set off on Bainbridge Island,
That makes sense.
as well as Kitsap County, as well as
Wow.
the next county over, which is King County, which is where Seattle is.
Right.
And so you're not allowed to have them at all. And in the middle of Kitsap, like if you're on Bainbridge Island, there's a bridge to get onto the mainland. And right on the other side of that bridge is a Indian reservation,
Okay.
and they sell fireworks. And so,
Interesting.
and they're allowed to sell them, but you have to. I don't know if they like people setting them off on the
I can imagine
reservation.
not. Yeah.
So they sell them because the federal government's not allowed to say no, I guess.
Right.
And but you legally you'd have to go for. I mean, I don't know where the closest place is where you're allowed to use them. Um,
Yeah.
you have to go a
Everywhere.
long, long way.
Yeah, so everywhere we go, and this is just like May, June kind of thing, there were fire warnings. At least orange everywhere
Yeah,
we went, if not red, kind of saw it.
yeah,
Like even if you were allowed to, I think there's a fire
yeah.
warning as well, which would make things.
I mean, so much of the U.S. was has had bad smoke problems because of you Canadians. No,
I mean, us plus wind,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
terrible mix.
yeah, yeah. No, it's Tony. It was in Detroit for a while, and they
Oh
were having
no,
some bad problems with smoke there.
yeah, I've heard as
Um,
far south as like Manhattan is pretty bad as well.
yeah, yeah. But it hasn't really. There were a couple of days over the last few weeks where there's been some smoke here in the Seattle area, but I
Yeah,
haven't really noticed it much.
knock on wood, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
we did have a couple years here at least during
yeah,
pandemic kind of times where it was pretty bad.
yeah. I did take advantage of Amazon Prime Day and bought a couple of air purifiers. So
Oh, that was
those
one of
should
the
be
things I
coming.
wanted to talk about. Okay, was there
Yeah,
anything else that you saw? Because for me, I guess the shiny kind of thing that got me, Amazon knows you as well, because like I use
yeah.
Amazon a lot, unfortunately. I've tried to like, step back from my purchases, but
Hmm.
I'm often on there browsing around. Hard drives this year, and not just hard drives, but like
Yeah,
SSD hard drives
yeah,
and SD
yeah,
cards are on pretty good discount.
yeah,
And I haven't pulled the trigger, but I was looking to get your opinion there because I'm always looking for more storage or faster
yeah.
storage.
Yeah, I mean to see I think I saw like the Western Digital Black M was it M2
Yep, there's an
SSDs
M2.
that are 4 I guess it would be 4 terabyte SSD for like $150.
Whoa, I didn't see the 4 terabyte one in Canada at least, but they did have an
Ah,
external one for 4 terabytes,
okay,
which is
yeah.
pretty cheap. And I
Yeah,
was
I mean
thinking the same thing. Like,
yeah, the T Samsung or no, the SanDisk Extreme
okay,
like 8 terabyte one. Oh man. Yeah, it's if I didn't I don't need one.
right. And I think I don't either, but
Yeah.
I
So
like
it
having
is
one of those
hard.
drives that you travel with and you've got just as
Yeah.
an overfilled drive or something like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I also like that you can plug them into iPads as well, which I know
Mhm.
is not maybe the biggest use case,
I
but
can't because I still have Lightning on my iPad Pro.
gotcha. I think you
Um,
can still get that accessory adapter or whatever you
yeah.
call it, but
Yeah, but I
it's a
think a
little bit
lot of
slower.
them require external power. There's not enough power on the
That's
device
true.
to power it. So
You need
it
a
needs
powered
all sorts
hub or
of
something. Yeah,
finagly things. Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point.
Um,
Honestly, that's all I looked at today. I tried to
yeah.
stay away from it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm looking for a monitor as well, but I'm trying to just calm down. I'll be okay.
Yeah.
I have monitors. I just want better ones.
Yeah. I for this space, this office space that I'm in, it is right now. It's 13 foot by 7 foot.
Right.
So
It's about to expand. Yeah.
yeah, and it's going to expand to, and that's by about I guess about 7.5 feet tall.
That's pretty good.
But we're going to knock the ceiling up to the full height of the garage, which is about probably 10 foot.
Nice.
And this wall will go from 7 feet wide to 9 feet wide. And so on the back wall in the camera, you won't see like the seam of either the ceiling or the
higher.
walls.
Yeah.
So that'll be because it's always, no matter what I do, it's always a little crooked.
Just before I hopped on the call, same thing. Like the shelf is just a little bit crooked.
Yeah.
It just drives me.
Yeah.
I don't know. It drives me wild.
So that way I will not have to worry about it being a little crooked, because you can't. I mean, the pictures are a little bit crooked, but
Gotcha.
But even with that larger space, so that's still going to be like 150 square feet.
Okay.
I don't think they usually do by cubic feet, but anyway, square footage is, it's still a pretty small space. And I was wondering, it's a closed space. There's no ventilation other than when I open up the door.
Right.
And so if I'm in here all day and I'm breathing out, does the air quality go down? And I've seen like what's his name, Jeff Geerling, his videos. He's talked about how he notices when his door's been closed for a while and there's no ventilation.
Right.
He's got a meter inside that sets off when it goes below a certain level.
Gotcha.
And so I'm sure it's pretty bad in here, and sometimes I get really tired in here, and maybe it's air quality.
You don't have a window or anything on the wall, or?
There are windows. They do not open.
Okay.
So when we do our renovation in a few, whenever that happens, we're going to place these double glazed windows with triple glazed windows to help with the sound, and we'll also make one of them so I can crack it open just a bit.
At least you're scaring me a bit. So you open the office door once in a while, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like a nightmare scenario. You close your door and just
I just closed it.
Wife calls you at your desk or something like that. That's awful.
Yeah, exactly.
Please be safe.
So I got a couple of the who is it? Levoit.
I haven't heard of them. Sorry.
We have a humidifier from the same company.
Okay.
But what set it apart for me was air purifier, but also with HomeKit integration and reacts to Siri and Siri or Alexa, and so that way I think theoretically, I mean, this is the hard thing with all these things. There might be a Home Assistant integration, but documentation is kind of lax or limited, and so knowing if it's got Home Assistant integration, I'm not really sure. And what does that look like? What does that do? I don't know.
Have you tried? There's not to go too far into the IoT weeds, because this is where we tend to play, but I think it's called
Homebridge.
Bridge. Yeah, Homebridge.
Yeah, Homebridge. Yeah,
is what I've used. The only issue I had is it wasn't very stable, so I had to write a script just to dump it,
recycle
once in a while.
it. Yeah.
It was. I think it did a week and a half kind of thing. But otherwise, when it worked, it was perfectly fine.
Yeah, and but there is a Home Assistant integration for the app that they use.
Perfect.
And apparently it works. And so I got one that is, far too big for this room, but it'll work with this room. So that was there was some model, Vital 200S or something, and then their Arctic Express or Everest something. I don't know. So their maximum line, which I'll put in the rest of the house.
Awesome.
So yeah, and they were like 30% off. So I thought, well, okay, that seems pretty good.
And again, maybe stating the obvious here, but as two people who like monitoring, is it worth having the Geerling, I don't know, oxygen monitor, that kind of thing? Because I'm just saying, having something that addresses a problem is good, but maybe also making sure that you can see the impact is handy.
Yeah, and these devices have the meter as part of the display. as well. Now, are they accurate? Oh,
Plus minus 10% probably,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Okay, that's good to hear.
and
Because that's what immediately concerned me. Like as soon as I hear, and I think this is the difference between like computer engineering and software engineering,
mhm,
or like software development and software engineering. Is like
right,
when I hear about human lives at risk and like
right,
technology, I immediately like ignore
yeah,
all other things. Is Matt safe?
yeah, yeah. And can you
Ignore the.
measure it? Yeah, can you measure it? Do
Can
you
you measure it?
know if there's an improvement? Yes,
Can you let your significant other know if maybe it dips
right,
or something like that? Like all of these other fail safes are the things that I start to think
yeah,
of immediately.
yeah,
Like those are the important things. And then of course, like you got to automate it and eliminate
yeah,
toil and all that stuff as well. But
yeah,
yeah, to definitely be safe as like
yeah.
a baseline.
Yeah, I mean, I can open up this door, but this door opens up to a garage. And the
Right.
garage is obviously a big place. I mean, there's usually a car that's in it, and the car
Right.
starts up, and then you open up the door. So there's all
This is
this
even
carbon
worse.
monoxide that's
Yeah.
in the, which is probably pretty bad.
Probably. Yeah.
So
Please be safe
yeah,
for all of your
yeah,
loyal fans
yeah,
out here.
yeah. All one drifter thrifters. Yeah,
Listen, your
um,
YouTube channel has quite a few followers as well.
yeah. It does. It
Let's
does. It
not
does.
discount
It
the
does.
actual
4,000.
long tail here. Yeah,
Yeah,
there you go. So that's a pretty
yeah,
good number.
yeah,
But I do think a lot of times we start to think about software immediately, which really concerns me in
yeah,
the IoT space. So
yeah.
I'll pull out the soapbox here for a minute, but I really do think whenever human lives are at
Hmm.
maybe not at risk, but like even if it's the quality of life that's at risk, I really think some maturity needs to be like
Yeah,
you need to use some sort of empathy and maybe the maturity of your
right,
career to think about like how Matt could be safe.
right, right.
What is your fail safe? Like
Yeah,
if it goes below a certain level or the carbon monoxide goes up a certain level, then
yeah,
like it opens up your door and turns on a fan kind of
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, exactly. And for Infra, the company,
Mhm.
we now have two offices. And when we opened up the first office in Toronto,
Right.
like the first thing that one of the two founders bought was like a heavy duty, like hospital grade IQ air purifier, and set that up for the. I mean, the room is probably 30-foot square,
Oh wow.
um, and and that's shared office for the seven of us, if we're all there. And then as soon as we opened up our Palo Alto office,
Right.
bought the same exact IQ air purifier, and so that's in there as well. So
I like that.
yeah, they recognize that this is pretty important thing. And although it's the first time I'd ever really seen them or seen anyone buy an air purifier.
Right. I'm just
So
trying to compare cultures a little bit, and I think that's what we do as humans, right? So when you're thinking
yeah,
about company culture, when you think
yeah.
about the first piece of office equipment that you grab, I think at Datadog it might be something like an espresso machine, perhaps. Whereas, and I think again, speaking of maturity
Yeah,
and empathy, an air purifier I think is
yeah,
actually a pretty rational purchase. And again, I'm discounting a little bit here.
yeah.
My opinions don't reflect those of my
Well,
employer, but I do
well,
find this really
being somebody who was at the um, Datadog office soon after it opened in
right,
Boston, at
right.
not their current office, but and not the previous office, but the office before that,
Okay.
um, which was across the street from South Station, which was awesome for like we'd watch people on drugs right outside. It was great. Um,
This is a spectator sport.
we we watched people doing crack right outside our window.
Speaking of empathy,
It
come on,
was
we got to
yeah.
work on this.
It was fun. It was because there were all sorts of fights. People were fighting it out. Oh, it's awesome.
You gotta that could be a relative.
um, and but yeah, I think the first. I'm trying to. I mean, the first piece of equipment was obviously the Wi-Fi, and then pretty soon after that came a speaker, like a Bluetooth speaker,
Okay.
because it was mostly salespeople, and so keeping the excitement going. Yeah, I
Did
think.
they have like a drum that went?
Yeah. There was a gong. There was a gong that also got purchased. But that's not really technology. That's an old technology.
Well, listen. In terms of because Boston was primarily sales, right? As
Yeah.
far as I know historically. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a quick detour into tech again, if you don't mind. But there is a
Mhm.
company that I've been watching quite a bit, and their name is Gong. And this isn't like a glowing,
Hmm.
review or anything like that, but I do find at the very least their communications are very good. So
Hmm.
this is one of those companies that is very good at sending emails that catch my eye. And
Mm.
it's very, I think the last one just like coupon code all lowercase.
Uh-huh.
And somehow like they know somehow like, coupon code. I click and they're like, gotcha. They're so good. So their
Yeah.
product, I think, is something to do with measuring and making sales better. I
Yeah.
should know more, but I
Yeah.
really do at least like that crafty way of getting newsletters.
Yeah.
And in terms of the name, it is one of the things that a lot of sales teams will get is a
Yeah.
gong to do the
Yep.
gong thing to let people
Yep.
know. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really
for a long
interesting.
time there was a service that would tie into whatever was tracking the sales pipelines and how many calls people, like even the phone system was hooked up to this tracking system.
Right. Salesforce has
And
like a custom
yeah, and this would like
call center.
each person had like their favorite song, and so as soon as somebody
Ah.
reached their number of dials that they had to do each day, their song, or if they were the first person to hit it, their song would play, and everybody would, it was like this competition thing always going on.
I'm such a troll. I immediately
Yeah.
thought of like, is it All I Want for Christmas Is You, but like all year round.
Yeah, yeah.
I like, for the audience that may eventually see this or not, I have spent some time in sales and I do understand that culture.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
it's almost like you're on a ship.
Yeah.
Like you're rowing on a ship or something like that, or like a dragon boat race kind of thing. Somebody's
Right.
with a drum, you want to keep him beat. But
Yeah.
it is important to have the sales force all kind of working together. And
Yeah.
I've set up that click to dial integration and stuff like that in Salesforce.
Yeah.
It's non-trivial, but once you get it
Yeah.
up and running, it's actually really cool. It removes
Yeah.
a bunch of tedium and toil. So you don't have to
Yeah.
say, yes, I did in fact just call this number and then like
Right.
load up the client and then write down
Right.
how long it was. You still have to write in
Right.
notes and things like that, but it brings you right to that screen. It's really
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. For a long time, Datadog didn't use Salesforce, but eventually it finally
Okay.
did as it got bigger. Yeah, so I think it's pretty. I mean, I assume it's still pretty important to the company now.
Yeah.
And now I'm out of it now for what, a year and a half now.
It's one of those things that, is it Benioff? I think it's very difficult
Yeah.
to avoid the Benioff behemoth. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot going on over there that will get you at some point in time. And
Mhm.
Salesforce, especially when you're dealing with partners, because everyone else is on Salesforce, there's
Yeah.
a lot of things that make it easier for you when
Right.
communicating with other businesses, like for channel sales and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I don't miss it, honestly. It's a
Yeah.
pretty interesting interface
Yeah.
that is aged for sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's definitely the standard. Something like
Yeah.
Concur, I guess, would be very similar in that everybody
Mhm.
just knows it.
Yep. Hates it.
I
Yeah.
think the other thing is like, I guess maybe an indicator is how long can you go before you have Salesforce or Oracle or some of these other products that like everybody ends up
Right.
grabbing, right? And I don't know, is it 10 years that it took
Yeah.
Datadog to get into Salesforce? 5 years, 6 years?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
so yeah. And
Definitely had it
other
when
one
I
is
when I
like
joined.
the other one is that the HR kind of app, and Workday. As you get bigger and bigger, and your company gets more and more complicated,
Yes.
but you still want to be like at the cutting edge.
Right.
Then you need to use services that are clunky, like Workday.
And
And
Workday is actually pretty good. Let me tell you.
and yet it's until you're in the know of how to use it, it's super frustrating. I'm so glad that I'm not, but
Yes.
and I'm glad that I'm at a company that's tiny where we don't need I mean, Datadog, when I left, was pretty complicated. When there were at the time 20 offices and
Right.
Thousands of people all around the world with all different tax laws and different vacation policies and different expense policies, and managing all that. I mean, it is hard, and for a team to manage that is hard.
And
Yeah.
we haven't even touched on time zones and
Yeah. Oh God.
daylight savings and all those
Yeah.
common problems that exist in most of these tools
Yeah.
that have to be handled. But there are pieces of software. I'm trying to think like the incumbents might be. Is it HubSpot? I'm trying to think of like what ERP you would use or what HR system you would use.
Well, HubSpot is more of a marketing solution.
Oh, is it? Okay, my
Yeah.
apologies. You can tell I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But Namely, I think is one.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of at a lower end.
Gotcha.
and because Datadog was a Namely customer for a long time,
There you go.
and
And I
um,
feel like this kind of stuff is fun to watch, similar to that gong, right? If there's an indicator for you that you've now achieved,
right,
I don't NetSuite or whatever. I see a lot of
yeah,
NetSuite ads around
yeah,
SF whenever I go there. But you know those products that everybody just sort of has,
yeah,
Salesforce,
yeah,
NetSuite, what have you. Um, yeah, it feels like when you the length of time that elapses prior to you hitting that point is an indicator of how fast you're growing, maybe is
right,
what I'm looking for. And I realize that these are expensive solutions or can be expensive
yeah,
solutions depending on when you adopt them. And it can take a lot to get there. But to
yeah,
me, it kind of speaks a little bit to that maturity or maybe that
yeah,
growth.
yeah. And a product area I never even imagined until I started at this company
Hmm.
was, this Infra is was founded. It's a Canadian company,
Right,
so headquarters in Toronto, but me and two others are in the U.S.
right,
And in order to hire U.S. employees, you need to have a U.S. subsidiary.
correct.
Um, and they don't want to. I mean, they're a new company. They don't want to set
Yeah,
up a subsidiary. So there are companies that are the U.S. subsidiary to hundreds of and thousands of
right.
companies, and they provide the. So you are. I was an employee of Infra, but I was also an employee of Deal, and Deal was
Gotcha.
the employer of record or employee of something, and they provide an insurance plan for all the employees
Ah,
across all the different companies, um, and so that and so that yeah, it was pretty interesting.
that is it's kind of like not shell company, but it's kind of like
Yeah,
that company as a
yeah,
service kind of thing. But
yeah,
just what you need.
right,
I,
right.
I was also hired on at Datadog through something similar, and I think we now
Mm,
have it's like a virtual office, but we at least have a Canadian financial
yeah,
entity, and then
yeah.
I work for that entity. We don't have an office, which recently came up because I had to reapply
Mm.
for my Nexus, and I was trying to figure out
Oh yeah,
what to do for that. But yeah, it's very interesting. I feel like these are the actual hard problems that like a lot
yeah,
of the software
yeah.
development can be working on because it's not easy.
Right.
Calendaring is one of the favorite ones that I like to
Yeah,
bring up a lot, and I kind of steal this a little bit from Software Defined Talk, a podcast I listen to. But honestly, just scheduling things is very difficult. Like if you and I want to schedule a meeting,
yeah,
that can be difficult if we're not. Let's say you're
yeah,
on 365 and I'm on Gmail
yeah.
or something like that. But if you add in someone else, it becomes for some reason that problem becomes very very difficult. There's a lot of like asynchronous communication, and then you hop on a telephone. You're like telephone call, and you're looking at each other's calendars and stuff.
One
Get
one second. It sounds like there's somebody at the door. I need to go check.
no
I'll be
worries.
right back.
I'll try to fill the dead air here. So while Matt's gone, we'll try to set him up here. So the main thing that bothers me about the calendaring software is even if you've got one of these services that can allow you to schedule things together, it feels like a lot of the times maybe it'll take a year, maybe two, but they'll become inundated with ads or they'll be purchased by someone else and they'll stop working. And because of that, this problem seems like one of those ones that just hasn't been solved for a while. And maybe when Matt gets back, we can get him to see what he thinks about this. But I do feel like time zones, daylight savings time, people's different calendars out of office, availability slots that may or may not be used properly, all this stuff kind of like adds into this massive problem, let alone if you want to reschedule something or if there's like we said more than one person or something like that. It feels like one of those areas where we need to concentrate a little bit more software engineering effort, but every time it's solved it looks like it's like they're purchased immediately or they're shuttered or lots of ads or you're added to like a mailing list or something like that. So it's one of those things I'd love to see solved because it's a constant source of frustration, especially now that we're trying to schedule something like dry runs and things like that for an internal conference. It's really obvious to me now, and I'd love to see someone take this on. We'll see what Matt has to say if he ever comes back. Other than that, maybe while we're waiting, I can bring up the subject that we'll tee this up a little bit. So I was looking through the news recently, and I noticed that Google has a medical AI chatbot that's already been tested at the Mayo Clinic called Palm 2 or MedPalm 2. My apologies. MED Palm like the tree, number 2. And what it is, if I understand it properly, is a chatbot similar to something like a ChatGPT that you can interact with. And what it can do is actually search through case history or other medical information that it's got in order to check things like your symptoms, that kind of stuff, as well as your, I think your patient files, which is maybe where it gets a little bit weird. and then allow you to like essentially suggest courses of action or maybe suggest possible symptoms or problems, underlying problems, which is pretty interesting. And I think immediately the knee-jerk reaction is that everyone's scared about this because it's got medical records and it involves AI. I think though there's like beneath all that, there's a bit of goodwill here in terms of ways of getting medical services to people in remote communities who may not have access to a doctor. There's a bit of point counterpoint here, and I think the point would be it would allow them this access. The counterpoint would be that currently, at least in Canada, what we do is we do that sort of phone call thing. So I think it might be again in one of these cases where it's possibly like a better additive solution. So perhaps if you've got a local RN who's helping with this as sort of workflow, I think that makes a little bit more sense. So there's a human in the loop as opposed to the patient talking directly to the chatbot. I think that's where people are scared. But if there's an intermediary or maybe someone else involved in this process, then I think it actually isn't a bad idea. It seems like one of those things that actually might have legs. So I'm watching this pretty closely. I'd like to see what happens there. And then we'll see what Matt thinks. So here he is. He's back. You got it.
Yeah, there was a very, 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 very upset 4-year-old.
Oh no!
Yes.
What has happened?
She had her. She goes to a day camp at a place here on the island called Islandwood.
Okay.
Islandwood was created by the guy who created PageMaker, Aldous PageMaker.
Yeah.
And she came home from that, fell asleep in the car. My wife needed the car, so I lifted her out carefully, put her down on the bed, and she fell asleep. And she's been asleep now for 2.5 hours.
Wow.
So great, except she woke up and wasn't really sure where she was, and came downstairs, and me and my wife weren't there, and because I was in here,
right,
and my niece was here, but she didn't see her, and so she was very, very upset.
Poor thing.
I had to console her.
No worries. While you were gone, I was ranting a little bit about calendar software.
Oh yeah,
and how I think there's a few areas that need to be solved.
Yeah.
The least of which is just scheduling things across people, let alone like multiple time zones and then suggesting new times.
Yeah.
The only other thing I mentioned while you were gone is this MedPalm 2 AI chatbot from Google, which I put a link in the
okay.
in the
Oh
Slack.
yeah. Okay.
But I explained it a little bit while you were gone. But I think the main thing is that it's kind of like ChatGPT for medical history and current symptoms. So if you came in saying, "Hey, my throat hurts," it could also look through your files and then get some more symptoms from you and maybe suggest like some courses of action and or saying like, "Hey, you should escalate this. It's pretty serious," that kind of thing. I think that the main response, and this is kind of what I was saying, is like a knee-jerk reaction saying like, "Hey, AI in medical records, like absolutely no. Let's stop there. It's a really bad idea." The funny thing is it's already been in testing for 2 years, I think, at the Mayo Clinic in the US, which is in New York, I think. At any rate, the reason I linked to that tech link video is because it kind of echoed the opinion that I have. The Mayo Clinic is where I go after WebMD tells me that, it's awful. And I'm like, maybe I'm going to check a second opinion.
Yeah.
And Mayo Clinic generally has some pretty well-written articles that are no BS. There's no crazy ads everywhere and stuff like that.
Right.
So you can get very quickly. At any rate, I think the main point that I wanted to get out of this, if I could extract some value from this article, is that there are people that this would serve in remote communities or communities that can't afford to have a doctor. My worry is that there wouldn't be like a human in the loop. So what I'd hope to not happen is if it's just a person who's sick communicating to the chatbot, or maybe like a family member who's also distraught, that kind of thing.
Right.
I do believe that fortunately in healthcare, you need somebody who's got some experience to help with this, as opposed to just hook you up to the chatbot, kind of giving you answers. But I'm actually pretty hopeful. I think this is a pretty cool idea. I think in Canada, at least, we've got a lot of remote locations that do not have doctors. We currently have them do like, I think it's called telehealth. Sometimes it's video, sometimes it's not. I think we're increasingly trying to get to video. But I feel like this could help with that as opposed to maybe replace that. And I think that's where a lot of these kind of AI stories have to be taken with a grain of salt, is where you're adding as opposed to replacing.
I think this is pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, I
Um,
get that there's something in this for Google. Obviously, they're a company
sure.
who wants to make money, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is like there's a legal focused kind of AI solution.
Right.
Because there was a story of pretty recently of somebody, I think it might have been Trump related, but
Okay.
somebody posting a some argument in a case. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. It came up recently. Argument in a case, and he listed 5 other cases that kind of proved his point of why
Okay.
this was a horrible suit and should be thrown out.
Right.
And except he asked ChatGPT for these,
Oh no.
and ChatGPT very confidently gave him
Hallucinated.
5 wonderful citations or whatever, and none of them actually existed. And so people are seeing example stories like this, and they're reading, oh well, ChatGPT isn't to be trusted.
Right.
No, that's the wrong. I mean, yeah, this guy was an idiot because he just posted
Yes.
an answer that he got without verifying. You got to verify everything you see.
Yes.
But then there's this other legal AI solution that is sold. You know, it's like $400 a head, $500 a head for law firms, which I guess is probably comparable to what's it,
Like,
LexisNexis and all those other types of
yeah, I was like,
tools.
this sounds affordable. I mean, for lawyers' offices.
Lawyer for yeah.
Yeah.
And and but this one only shows actual cases, and it confirms by like looking up the cases and showing
Perfect.
here is the part of, and you can actually verify it with the document, with the books, all the books that people have in their law offices. And so it's real stuff, and that's why you're paying $400-$500 a month for
Right.
access to this service. And so, and I assume MedPalm is probably going to be doing something similar. It's been trained on data that's related to healthcare and drug interactions and all
Right.
those types of things. And it's probably got more secure. It's not going to be sharing data as well as much as if you post your data to ChatGPT.
Right.
Depending on whether you're paying for it or not, what you asked and what you got back may end up going into the engine itself for further training. And I mean, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So,
Absolutely. Did you ever watch House MD? That my immediate thought about
it's
this
lupus.
is like, yeah, it's like this has got to be better than House, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not.
It's
Like,
lupus.
it's got to be better than House.
Yeah.
Because I feel like doctors are human, and there's just there's a certain amount of unfortunately like ego that comes into play as a doctor, because as you get more experience, you feel like you know things, even though medicine has also been learning things at the same time, like a field. And at some point, it's like there's an inflection. At some point in time, your skills kind of plateau, and the rest of the industry keeps going, and it's difficult to know when you should step aside and maybe get like a second opinion, and maybe this would help with that. Be something to cross check with, because I've been to clinics, I've seen people like actually using tools, not the internet, but they're using their own diagnostic kind of tools to look up symptoms and kind of like look through things. And I get what that's at. I think the other sort of meta thing here is that people are starting to use AI as a search engine as opposed to a search engine, and it feels like this is just like
as a what engine versus a search engine?
Like using it as a search engine as opposed to using a proper search
okay,
engine. So using Google as opposed to like an AI, or using ChatGPT to ask something instead of, because there's a bit of compound stuff going on. So like give me restaurants that are 5-star rated, not in New York, but are in New York and available until 10 p.m. kind of thing, is a little bit difficult to do on a search engine. Whereas when you've got like some memory to like put this in a pool, grab it later, and then like look something else up. It's kind of the cool paradigm there in terms of using the Bing search or what have you. Like in this context, also do this. Can be difficult for a search engine, which kind of hits like that first layer. So for all of the internet, find me web pages that match these words is like a pretty naive approach now that we know of this. That's yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I want to say it's like the find engine as opposed to a search engine, but then again, I'm not really sure because sometimes it just makes stuff up too.
Yeah.
The hallucination engine.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I when we were looking at when we were focused on building out this SSH tool at
Right.
Infra, I asked ChatGPT for like, show me 5 stories of
Right.
companies that have had security breaches that were caused by insecure SSH keys, and it gave me 5 amazing stories. Like, it described the whole story. It described the company. I kind of vaguely remember that company having some sort of problem, and it's like, okay, that could have been it.
Yeah, this tracks.
And then can you provide articles that let me find more information? And it did. I said, well, this is great. Let me ask for some more. So I asked, come up with 20 more. And it did come up with 20 more great, really juicy thing, like really bad stuff. And it's like, God, this is awesome. And so I created my list, and it's like, oh, this is great. I even shared it with some of the team. Like, look at it, what I got from ChatGPT. This is amazing. And then I started following some of those links, and none of them existed. None of those stories were real.
It's like
None of that happened. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are something. I think they're calling it prompt engineering now, but there
Yeah.
are ways of at least
Yeah.
talking to ChatGPT,
Yeah.
which I think can be better. So using only facts that you can verify.
Right.
Please give
Right.
you shouldn't need to be told this. However,
Yeah.
please-
And then
please
there
allow me.
are some types of questions that these engines have a hard time with, like any sort of math, and it can be simple math. Like,
Right.
one of the examples I've heard somebody use is, I have 7 whole potatoes.
Oh,
I've
I haven't
used
heard this one.
one. I used one. I mashed up one of them for mashed potatoes.
Okay.
How many whole potatoes do I have left?
Oh, I love this.
And it's and it like and explain your work. And so this is, explain your work is usually the key for any sort of math problem, because
Right.
usually it goes left to right,
Right.
and it comes up with an answer. But if you ask to explain its work, then it like does it the right way. And so it it says, okay, there are 7 potatoes. 7 minus 1 is 6.98. And then it goes on to explain why 6.98 is the correct answer.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Um,
Have you used
yeah.
any of the plugins? I don't really use
No,
too many,
I
but
haven't. I
Wolfram's
mean,
one
there's-
of them. You would
Yeah.
assume that Wolfram would say like, no. In fact.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of plugins. I was excited about the plugins, but there are so many plugins now, and so many of them are just stupid.
I wouldn't say stupid, but there's a kayak one that I did try that I didn't find very useful
Yeah.
at all. Speaking of that, like first level kind of
Yeah.
search, that seemed to be all it did, and he couldn't really correlate it with anything, which is
Yeah.
it just wasn't handy. So you're essentially
Yeah.
just handing off search stuff. The other thing is I found a lot of them were quite slow.
Yeah.
The Wolfram one did seem handy. I didn't really use it for much.
Yeah.
I think the other thing here, and speaking of trust, is like I feel like when you're making API calls out of ChatGPT to other APIs, they may
Mhm.
be logged by the other API. Just
Yeah.
a thought. And then there you kind of wonder what you're searching for, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. But that's
Yeah, I mean, there's the great case of Samsung and them asking ChatGPT for something about some secret project, and
now I have
he-
to apologize. I think I said I saw it happen twice. I think it was the same time being reported
okay.
with a delay kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because as a former Samsung employee, I'm often
Yeah.
watching this. It's a really big company.
Yeah.
Keeping a company with 300,000 employees secure
Yeah.
is very difficult. We
It's
can just start
incredible,
there.
yeah.
That's just a lot of people. A
And
lot of
only
areas
takes
of
one
ingress.
person. It only takes one person who is trying to do the right thing and do something
Trying to do the
amazing
job.
with the
Yep.
resources they have, and something happened that they didn't expect.
And
Yeah.
and again, coming from the inside, some of those things can be things like so you've got a flagship phone coming out that has an internal nickname.
Mhm.
Sometimes that name can actually be pretty key, because there might be things out there, but until you know the
Mm-hmm.
name, you can't really associate that stuff with it, because there might
Right.
be orders or things going back and forth, or
Right.
patents or things like that. You might not know about it until you can start piecing things together. but it's something like that can be pretty disastrous for a
Yeah.
phone launch, just as an example, or a product
Yeah.
launch prior to getting it, because it will delay decisions for purchases, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. So it can be not just damaging in terms of reputation, but also in terms of sales. So I
Yeah.
get it. It's also very porous, so it's very difficult. That's why the
Yeah.
code names exist. So this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Oh, it's hard. It's
Yeah.
such a mess. I did want to say though, like in terms of the AI stuff, and I'm gonna tee you off here just a little bit, and I apologize for it,
It's
but
okay.
lo and behold, I spent my entire weekend playing around with Automatic 1111. And specifically, Automatic
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
1111
yeah.
is a generative, it's like a DALL-E on your own computer kind
Yeah.
of thing. So it's stable diffusion or what have you, generally
Right.
stable diffusion for making images. And what I was
Right.
trying to do is find a set that could do something similar to what I use Canva for, which is
Mhm.
such a minuscule use case, but
Yeah.
Canva can do really good retro manga renditions in pretty small
Mm.
size
Mhm.
of things like apartment buildings or
Mhm.
infrastructure for me when I'm trying to illustrate something
Yeah.
that's talking about scale, that kind of thing. I find it really
Yeah.
good. And I do notice that like the palette tends to be CMYK, so sort of like 80s
Mhm.
when four color process came about. So
Mhm.
it's got a cool retro look. It's a mess.
No.
I think we've talked about this offline before, but it is a mess, and this is with
Yeah.
nothing but like all of the love for Automatic
Yeah.
1111. Like honestly, great
Yeah.
job. It gives you an API that you can use. I can
Yeah.
use it from another computer. What I was trying to do was use Photoshop with it in order to generative fill some areas that were a little bit more detailed than what you get from Photoshop.
Mhm.
So specifically, there's a plugin for Photoshop that you point to an API. That API picks up
Mm.
the call, returns you back an image. And honestly, for a Mac user, and I get that a lot of people out there have M1s and M2s. I do
Yeah.
not. I
Yeah.
don't have a powerful GPU, so it's easier for me to outsource that to like a
Yeah.
couple 3090s that I've honestly got sitting around.
Right.
So I just point over there. It's really cool. What I noticed though is that the models have, and I haven't used it in about 2 months, so not that long. I had been
Mhm.
using it quite a bit. The models are crazy. So I started using something called Civit AI, and there's a big
Mm.
NSFW disclaimer here, and it's
Mhm.
obvious on the site. Like don't hit the things that say 18 plus, whatever. There's a bunch though, a bunch of models that will do manga and anime and things like that, safe for work stuff. You know, if you want to
Mhm.
just like generate buildings, that kind of stuff in a retro style, in like an amazing fashion. So
Mm.
above and beyond what I was doing at Canva, and maybe more importantly to me, being able to upscale at the same time. And
Mm.
what I was banging my head against the wall is because, of course, I was like, okay, so I know this upscale high res part takes a long time, and I know it's PyTorch and I know it's using Python.
Mhm.
How do I get something like Datadog to get in
Right.
there and at least tell me like which part of this component is taking the longest time? Am I CPU bound,
Oh, yeah.
memory bound, disk bound, GPU bound, all that stuff, right? Like
Right.
this is taking a while. How do I make it better? And I kind of hit a wall because it's difficult in Windows to get around. Let's just say Python. Python in Windows is a bit
Mhm.
odd. And what I ended up doing was installing the Microsoft Marketplace version of Python. At the
Mhm.
end is what solved my problem. So
Right.
essentially a system-wide Python that could help me out.
Right.
And I don't know, it just felt weird to get Python
Yeah.
from the Windows store.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it did work really well. I guess what I'm trying to say is that like you and I talked about how this is a bit of a pain to set up and get running.
Mhm.
I thought it was a lot easier than when I actually started kicking the tires, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's a bit of a mess, and monitoring it is
That
not easy.
doesn't, I mean, I seem to remember there was a news thing about Datadog offering some sort of OpenAI integration. What is that doing?
Yeah, so my understanding of this, having not used it before, is what it will do is it's like an intercept essentially. So as you're calling the API, we'll
Mhm.
track the calls. Uh,
Okay.
so that's the OpenAI one. I think the cool one, see, it's gonna sound like a Microsoft shill, but I feel like the Azure version of OpenAI,
Mm.
which is all service
Yeah.
based,
Yeah.
is pretty interesting in that we can monitor it from the back end as well as the front end if you
Mhm.
want, but we can tell you how many calls you're using on the service side,
Mm.
which I think is pretty neat. So we can get those metrics directly from the
Right.
cloud. It's not agent less in terms of like
Mhm.
if you want to grab all the APM stuff from it, you'll probably want the agent. But in terms of giving you this service information, which is pretty
Right.
handy
Yeah.
if you're having multiple people hit it, I thought it was actually pretty cool.
Hmm.
Again, that's maybe other people will have it. I
Yeah.
know Google's got their Vertex, and I think Amazon's working on
Yeah.
something for SageMaker that's similar. But I do like being able to have that integration that can talk to a backend and then give you
Mhm.
data without you necessarily having to have an agent and
Right.
custom Python code to
Right.
do it. But again, that's neither here nor there. It sort of depends how you're using it. But for an
Yeah.
internal service, like I don't know, Matt GPT that you've got running within your own org that will
Right.
hit Azure OpenAI.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep trying to say Open API. It's going to be a long 5 years.
Yeah.
When it's hitting Azure Open API, they can actually tell you how many calls per second you're doing,
Right.
that kind of thing, and let you know what the service
Yeah.
level is.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty neat.
Cool.
That is the long and the short of it.
Yeah.
Yep. So models, yeah. I spend a ton of time using models, and then when I was talking to Rick this morning, he's like, have you tried control nets? And he's like, oh yeah, you did tell me about that last week. No, I'll try those too.
Oh.
Yeah. So trying to figure out different ways of, I think he was talking about lighting scenes. So you can have control nets for different types of light or masking lights and scenes. There's also in paint and out paint. I'm not sure if you've played around with those at all.
No.
Okay. So imagine, for those in audio only, imagine a photo of Ryan talking to you on a microphone where you take the photo and then you scribble over the microphone and then you write in, I don't know, maybe it's I'm trying to think of like a corn cob or a hot dog or something else that might protrude. Perhaps it's a baseball bat. But there were a bunch of models. So like this manga that my wife used to read called Touch, for example, which is a specific baseball manga. There's actually a LoRa for it. A LoRa is kind of like a way of shortcutting the end of the model prior to giving you the image to make sure it matches a certain style prior to like being output. That's a super oversimplification, but you could type in umpire, for example, which exists in baseball, no problem, and it would give you the style of touch. What I found super interesting though is that I don't know what happened in like the translation, but when you type in umpire, it will often give you a policeman or like the head of like chief of police is generally what this person would look like. So there's definitely still some issues with like how it translates at the end, but it's really cool in that it will output a style of mostly cover art, honestly, but like cover art for this series as opposed to like the black and white. So it's a color and kind of glossy looking.
Yeah.
But this is like really, really niche. There's people developing models trained on stuff on their own computers and developing and publishing models or LoRa's that you can use that will like put it in there. Anyway, I had a fun weekend.
Well, one thing I just stumbled on today was a tool called Prompter. It's like prompter.fofr.ai, I think as the URL, something like that. Does that come up?
I'm trying to find it.
Oh,
There's prompter.ai.
No, it's not prompter.ai. Prompter. On my other computer.
Okay. What does it do?
But it's you type in what you think is the prompt that you care about, and let's say a picture of a person sitting on a chair talking into a microphone with pictures on his wall. But for a person sitting on a chair, instead of chair, you put a square bracket, furniture dot seats. And so and then for all the other things also put these list commands. And then it will generate like dozens and dozens of variations on your prompt that have one of the list of items. And so then and maybe film.type. And so with different film stocks and different color styles and it will generate all these variations, and then you can kind of look through and actually that's something I didn't think of. And so I think that's
really cool. I couldn't find it. I feel like prompting is kind of a loaded term at this point in time, so it's difficult to find. But I do really like that I guess if prompt engineering is a job, I do like the fact that we're starting to make some of those tools a little bit easier to understand for people.
Yeah.
Because that curly bracket, the brace expansion is how I kind of think of it, is really powerful in a lot of languages, and being able to bring that into a prompt, I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Definitely. So show me this for like a Kodak Portra or Fuji Superia. Like the film.type really got me. You know, sniped me there. Now I'm super interested. But I do find like Midjourney can do a really good job of giving you something that looks, I know filmic is not really a term, but something that looks like it was shot on film.
Yeah.
I just it blows my mind. And I'm not a Midjourney subscriber. I just kind of watch the Discord stuff go by, but it's really cool to watch how quickly Midjourney is evolving into something that can actually generate the art.
Right.
Which I'm putting like air quotes around it, but like, it's hard to not call it art at this point in time.
Yeah.
It might be how do you say it? It might be like it's copied or inspired from, but it's definitely art, which is a little bit
Right.
odd. Very odd.
Man, I can't find this.
You can't find it?
No.
We're coming up
find
to
it.
about 50 minutes. Was there anything you wanted us to check out for this week that you
do,
found?
I
Oh,
do.
well, of course.
Well, I wanted you to check out the tool that we're working on at Infra.
Oh, what is that
Um,
tool?
Yeah, so that is called Olama. Like,
Olama?
you know, so many of these tools are llama or vicuña, which is a type of
Right.
llama-like
Yeah.
animal, or alpaca, and
Right.
there's like a fourth one that's also guanaco, I think, is a
Oh, I only know those three.
llama-like thing.
Okay.
And so all these models are llama-esque because that was the original model that Meta put out,
Right.
or started to put out, then it got leaked out, and
research only, I think, at the time, and then
and like so many others have like latched on to the idea of what they're doing with different licensing, and but and then, you know, at the same time there's people who are sharing too much information on ChatGPT and other services, and there's legal issues that are popping up. There are companies that are saying, no, you cannot use any sort of AI tools that are online, and you know, so using these tools online is either not allowed or scary or cost money, and that maybe you don't have the money, and you for some reason have a beefy machine instead, and because maybe you have a work machine and you want to be able to play with some of these tools.
These M2s are pretty powerful, actually.
Yeah, you've got a really powerful gaming machine that you bought for, I don't know, whatever the cool game is right now. What was the game that you had with the baby on the backpack?
Oh,
Proof of Death, or
Death Stranding.
Death Stranding, yeah, okay.
Would highly recommend buying a gaming PC to run Death Stranding, and then when you're not using it, like generate stuff for you.
Yeah. So you've got these machines, you've got this hardware, and so people are trying to use these models locally, and there's a lot of tools for doing this. So you can either start with tools like PyTorch that require to really understand Python, or you're downloading. There's GPT for All, that is a really nice app that's but complicated. You know, you download it, and then there's a lot of buttons and a lot of, you know, switches and things that you need to tweak, or you don't tweak, and maybe you don't have a good experience. And then there are so many others. There's one that I saw today was Pinocchio, or others that are Llama Chat, and some of these tools require you to bypass the Mac quarantine, because obviously they're doing things they probably shouldn't be doing. So there's all these tools, and they're all complicated. Some of them, you know, try to make it easier, but it's just basically a bash script that is going through all these pip installs. And you know, if it runs into any problem, and chances are your Python environment isn't perfect, and so you're going to run into a problem, and now you need to become a developer to try to troubleshoot why did it not get installed. So there's all these tools that are out there, but they're hard to work with, and are they really taking advantage of your hardware? And so we put out a few weeks ago Olama as a PyPy module, so you could do pip install Olama, and that was pretty good. But we couldn't add GPU. You know, couldn't take advantage of the GPU that way. And the way a lot of the other tools that are using a Python module is, they say, okay, well, compile it yourself to add that. So it's like, we don't want people to have to compile. So we spent a few days kind of migrating that Python app to a Go app. And you know, we know Go because we built a few different tools in Go. And so we knew how to make it efficient and to make a good experience. So we built a Go-based app. For now it's Mac only. It will be adding Windows and Linux soon. So added that, but the downside was, okay, yeah, it uses the GPU, but using the GPU is actually slower than using the CPU.
I've
the way
noticed
we had
that
it.
depending,
Yeah.
depending on what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we've got a new version. It's either out now or out very soon. That will, when you use the GPU, it's like way faster, and it's always fast, and it's great. So that's amazing. In fact, for some of the like initial benchmarking I've been doing, it's probably one of the fastest ways of running models locally.
Oh, really?
And it will automatically update now. So when there's a new version, it automatically updates to the latest
That's awesome.
version. And we're doing all sorts of other stuff to try to make it really easy to train the model. Not yet, but soon. And a lot of other ways of distributing. And so got a lot of great ideas that are going to be coming soon. So that's at Ollama. That's OLLAMA.ai.
Oh, you get the
And
AI.
so, yeah, .ai. And if you miss the, it's 2 L's. Ollama. Pretty plain site right now.
It's got a cute logo though, right? Like we're all about the logos here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. So that's what we've been working on. It's really pretty cool. I'm interested to hear what your experience is like on a non-M Mac, so an Intel Mac.
Right. I can certainly, and at least on Windows, I do have like a way of running VMs with GPU support, so I can try that too. Which
I'd say it is Mac only for now.
It seems to have Docker on there. So is it Mac like ARM or Mac like Intel? Yeah, we'll find out. I'll test it. All right.
Yeah, sure.
That is
and
sweet.
Yeah, it's working really, really well. In fact, it's got there's a when you install it, when you copy over to your applications directory, it'll actually also create. Well, it moves itself over, and then it will I think it adds the CLI. So it starts as a UI app, except it's really just a menu bar app, and all the menu bar does for now is allow you to quit it. So it doesn't really do a whole lot. It'll do more. It does the auto updating.
Gotcha.
But that menu bar app also is actually running a server, and that server has a RESTful endpoint.
Nice.
And so working with all your LLMs, you just work with this REST endpoint that's on a local port. So that's the other neat thing about it. And we'll have bindings and libraries for Python and Node.js and other tools to make calling that RESTful endpoint a little bit easier. But for now, it's fetch, requests, whatever to grab that endpoint. So yeah, that's Ollama.
And the repos, and this is more of a personal question. The repos under J Morgan Ka.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is, because this often happens, is like, do you have a policy in terms of like what's an in-house repo versus not, like that kind of thing often comes up?
Yeah. So this was something that we've been noticing, even a lot of companies that are in the kind of AI space, they're having their repo hosted on a personal repo, on a personal org or whatever, personal account, even though it's being managed and being run by the company.
Interesting.
And so many of the models also have that, where the model comes out attached to a human being rather than to an organization. And we're a 7-person organization, but it is about the person, and a lot of the we're going to be putting out a lot more videos. The videos are going to be on my personal channel.
Gotcha.
And not on the infra channel.
Interesting.
And really be about the person.
It definitely feels more authentic, and it kind of seems to have that like hacker, as in people working on things, culture like attached to it as well, which is neat.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So yeah, it's definitely Jeff Morgan is the one of the 2 founders of the company. So Jeff and Michael created the company, and they were the 2 guys that when they were college students in their dorm room, they created a little tool called Kitematic, which made Docker easy.
You never told me this.
What?
I'm
I never told you that?
fanboying a little bit.
Oh,
Kitematic was my absolute kite. I think it's 0.7
yeah,
or 0.8.
yeah,
Just before Docker purchased them, I
hmm,
used that for years, and
yeah,
still I go back to it some days, just because like when I want to get in and do something really
yeah,
quickly, that's where I go.
yeah,
And it had the concept of like a menu or like a McDonald's menu kind of thing, where it would
yeah,
have pictures of the apps you could
yeah,
run, which
yeah,
for a lot of developers kind of made Docker click for them. So I was able to
yep,
show people Kitematic. In fact, I showed a
yeah,
lot of, like, I'm not sure about hundreds, but at least like
yeah,
100 people Kitematic
yeah,
inside of Samsung, like how to run Docker
yeah,
on computers, and they loved it because it
yeah,
gave you a lot of like easy ways to change ports and volume maps and stuff like that, which these days I think maybe Portainer is similar. It's not the
hmm,
same,
hmm,
but it's kind of going down that
yeah.
path. But yeah, I'm sorry, fanboying a little bit here, but Kitematic is very, very cool. Please let them know that I'm an
Yeah.
absolute all-star
Yeah, so
fan.
that's
0.8 was
those 2 guys
phenomenal.
that created it.
That's super cool.
In
And
fact, there's
Canadian too.
another,
And now I'm even more
yeah.
excited.
So, I think we both know, Chris, I think Chris Short, is it?
Yep.
At AWS.
Yep.
Um, he came by, I already knew him from before, and so he came by I kind of flagged him down. He came over and got the little intro.
I know of
Um,
Chris in case he ever
okay.
sees this episode. I
Okay.
definitely don't know him.
Okay. Well, he's at the booth, and I have Jeff, one of the 2 founders, give him the demo. And Jeff is like, "Chris Short, oh my god, this is great." He's kind of awestruck at
Yeah.
meeting with this person, and oh wow, he's famous.
Yeah.
And so yeah, does the demo, and Chris is, had good things to say. And then he started going away, and we started chatting a little bit more. And I said, "Well, actually, do you remember Kitematic?" And he was like, "Oh my God, Kitematic was incredible! This incredible tool." It says, "Well, the 2 founders of this company, they created Kitematic," and he was like, "Oh
Yeah.
my God!"
Because it helps
I mean, he's
so
like
much at the time.
awestruck at seeing royalty. So they were both like so amazed
Oh,
at
I
each
love
other.
that. I love that.
Yeah, yeah,
That's so cool. I
yeah,
really feel like so in terms of evangelism for me, one of the
yeah,
biggest parts of the job that I love is kind of like hobnobbing with people who have like written tools that have
yeah,
removed major obstacles in my life. And
yeah,
Kitematic's one of those ones. And it
yeah,
was Docker adoption within like a large enterprise company was the
yeah,
problem we were trying to solve. And
yeah,
Kitematic really helped with that adoption,
yeah.
which is nothing but love. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
So cool.
yeah. The company is made up of a lot of really. I mean, there's only 7 of us, but we've
Right.
all done really impressive things in our backgrounds. Whether it's early VMware, early Docker, early
Right.
all sorts of people. So it's an interesting group.
That's really cool, man.
And
That
so
sounds
like they did with Docker, trying to make Docker really easy to use for accessible for
great. Now
more
I get it. It all
people.
makes sense. Yeah.
Now we're trying to do the same thing around AI.
Yeah, Kitematic for DALL-E and Llama.
Hmm.
I like it. I like it.
Look out for more extremely cool things coming
Sorry,
soon.
maybe I'm going too far ahead. We'll say Llama first. I'm assuming that there's other things coming up, having talked about Automatic 11.11 already.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is going to be rolled into the Olama tool,
Gotcha.
and that's going to be your interface to it.
Very neat.
But yeah, there's going to be a lot of really neat things.
That's super cool. My checkout is not even close to this, and you've probably already seen it, so I apologize. I was late to the game on Silo on Apple TV
Oh yeah.
because I read the books
Oh, you
and
did?
yeah, well, okay, we'll start there. That's what pissed me off the most. Why would you name this Silo? Half of the book is like they don't know where they are or what they're doing. They don't even know that
Mm.
they're in a silo for the
Oh,
longest time in the book.
interesting.
And in the series, it sounds like how do you know you're in a silo?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, what like how would you know the frame of reference to understand that
right,
this is a silo and
right,
what a silo does, et cetera, et cetera. And
right.
there's definitely some liberties taken in the TV show,
Mm.
and there's that sort of American storytelling thing where it has to be about an interpersonal relationship. There has to be
Hmm.
like one main character as well. Where
Hmm.
I thought the book did a better job of like not having too much romance and not having too much
Mm.
of like the protagonist, but it was like
Right,
kind of
right.
handed off a little bit. They touched on that a bit, but yeah, there's a bunch like they're brushing their teeth. Where did
Hmm.
they get the toothpaste? Who made the toothbrush? If you can't go below a certain size, there's a lot of questions that the book just glosses over, which is
Hmm.
cool, but also not great. And then
Yeah.
the series they actually put into detail, but then it raises even more questions. But it's
Hmm.
regardless, like of
Yeah.
all this stuff, it's actually really good. The
Yeah.
cinematography is fantastic. Some of the
Yeah.
areas in the book that were let's say like really dark, they describe a scene as being pitch black. I think they handled
Mhm.
really well in the scene. And
Mhm.
I think for me at least, it got me thinking about that adaptation. So if this is a book, let's just like slap ChatGPT on this, for
Yeah.
example. Like take this book, make this into a screenplay, and then make a movie. I think is
Yeah.
insurmountable. Like this is actually
Yeah.
quite difficult for ChatGPT to come up with. And I
Yeah.
understand the Screen Writers Guild strike about this kind of stuff because these
Yeah.
really aren't the same thing. You do
Yeah.
need a
Yeah.
human in this process. And there were actual problems solved by this series that I thought were pretty creative in the same
Mm.
way that I liked what was the one with the dragons? I've already Game of Thrones, for
Game of
example.
Thrones.
Having read those books,
Yeah.
the books, I realize some people really like the books. I'm here to tell you, yeah, I'm gonna shoot my shot here. I don't think they were written very well
Yeah.
at all. I actually
Yeah.
don't think he's good at detail
Yeah.
specifically, and you can't just say a dragon flew down. What kind of dragon? Was it big? Was it small?
Yeah.
Was it breathing fire? What color was the dragon? Did it have scales? Like I have a lot of questions here. Whereas the
Yeah.
series, I thought took a lot of liberties, of course, on the book
Yeah.
because of that, because there was missing stuff, but did it quite well. And then the cast of characters in the book all
Mm.
kind of ran together to me. Just made
Mhm.
up names. I just had a really hard
Mhm.
time keeping all these
Yeah.
people in my head. But with visuals, I think it actually
Yeah.
really helped me. Oh, okay, this one primarily dresses in red, and these
Right.
two balding 40-year-old men are
Yeah.
slightly different because one of them is the king and the other one is
Right.
not. Like
Right.
some of these things really helped. And I guess what I was watching Silo, I was thinking about that the whole time. And I thought
Mm.
maybe that sort of made a narrative was interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
As someone who generally reads a book and doesn't like the series, I thought the series is possibly better in most ways,
Mhm.
and except for the title.
Yeah.
It should be
Yeah.
like a mini series called Wool, and then the next mini series should be called Silo.
Mm.
Not to get rid of not to,
Yeah.
to tell you the spoil the end here, but
Yeah.
yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like the end of the series is when we figured out they're in a silo, and
Yeah.
then the next one
Yeah.
could be called that. But that's just me.
Yeah.
That's naming is hard.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all I have.
I started watching it. The first episode I thought was not that
Yeah,
good.
I kind
I
of
got into it a little bit second, and by the third, I was like,
I
and I don't even know why I watched the first two episodes. I think I was stuck on a plane. I had downloaded them and watched them on a plane, and then I was like, I need to devour the whole thing. And then Tony is just, I think she's at episode 10 or whatever, N-1, where, you know,
okay, 9. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, she's also hooked, and it is a amazing series. You know, for books turned into series, the one that I'm very interested in to understand how are they going to do this. I can't imagine how this is going to work, because I have read the book. It is Three Body Problem.
Oh, yeah, I have not read the book. I tried to listen to the audiobook. This is a very complicated story.
Complicated, yeah.
And I was like, you know what? This is one of those few cases. I was like, maybe I'll just read the series.
Yeah,
it is one of these ones
really
would be
hard.
a better book to actually read, to sit down with
Yeah.
the physical book and actually spend time on each sentence, because it's
Yeah.
also quite dense. There's a lot going
Well,
on.
it's a
There's actual
Chinese book
physics.
written and translated into English, and it's
Yeah,
got a different style of telling a story, and
it does.
it's really, I'm not used to that kind of reading, and it was hard.
Me either. Yeah, I think the only, like, when I'm talking about Western storytelling, I think the only ones that I'm used to, kind of like in terms of reading, be like more South American, I guess, or
Mhm.
specifically Japanese, and none of the rest of the
Mhm.
like Asian continent, but like sorry, APAC, but just Japanese storytelling is a little bit different.
Yeah.
It is not the same throughout Asia though. It's a little
Yeah.
bit different here or there. But that protagonist kind of thing, I think is pretty
Mm.
interesting. Three Body Problem though, it also has a ton of physics, if I'm to
Yeah.
understand this properly.
And computer science. And
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
oh yeah, I mean there's, so one of my favorite, like, there's all sorts of, like, I guess, story arcs in the book, and
Right.
like whole things that could be like a story on its own, just like focus on that thing. And part of it is because, you know, it is such a dense book that I may have skipped a few pages here and there. And so maybe I didn't get the whole meaning, but from what I read, I interpreted part of the story about this guy who was involved with, you know, this Chinese army and they each person took the role of one component within a computer. So logic gates and on off, and so he had this army of like 10,000 soldiers to help calculate what is the best, I don't know, something that they were going to do. And it was fascinating learning about how a computer works by building this army of human beings that just said, raised a flag or not, to be able to determine how to make a decision.
Wow. And
That
this
was
is on
amazing.
Netflix, I think. So hopefully they have the
Yeah, I
budget.
don't know. I saw the trailer and it looked incredible.
I just looked it up. It had a Netflix logo, so I assume that's the case, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm just hoping that they have a budget right now. I literally, I think I stopped on page 1. It was an audiobook, but I really didn't get farther than like maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I was like, this is really dense. I need to go to sleep. This is not the book for right now. And then just never returned to it.
Yeah.
It was quite complicated. But
I mean, though I don't, I mean, because I think I got to it because the translator has a book of short story, or has a few books of his own, and has a short stories collection, which is really, really great. I mean, so his stories are great, wonderful. And then he did this translation, and it's I don't remember, like, I just remember slogging through it and finding these amazing bits in the middle. But another book I remember from that is also super complex, but a much older book, War and Peace. So in, like, I don't know, 10th or 11th grade, you had to read. Our English teacher said, okay, here are these 30 books or 15 books, I don't know, whatever number of books you need to read, or you can read War and Peace. And they'll read one book.
If
you read one book,
you get hornswoggled.
Fine, that cancels everything else out.
I have tried to read this book 5
times to read War and Peace, and only like 1 or 2 made it through.
It's so long, and it's Tolstoy.
And like the first 2 pages, there are like 40 characters that are introduced,
and you may never see them again.
My God,
it's worse than Catch-22. Catch-22 is really bad for that.
Even the Cliff Notes was hard.
And it's like this thick. It's amazing.
God, yeah.
Like 8
10 pages, like onion skin, tiniest type possible. It is not accessible.
This is one of those things where I feel like ChatGPT could do a good Cole's Notes, right?
Like,
those are good Cole's Notes, but can you make them longer?
Yeah, it's
I do need to read that though before I die. Like that's one of them. Tolstoy and Dostoevsky are 2 authors that I found inscrutable when I was younger, going through all of literature at used bookstores, kind of thing. And those 2 were just way too much for me.
I did a few. I mean, my degree, my super helpful degree from college, is actually in Russian language. Super useful every day. Yeah.
With the brothers Karamazov,
Well, I mean, I did a few Russian lit classes, and I mean, there were some that were fantastic. Master and Margarita, and Master and Margarita is great. I think Bulgakov, and I think actually there might have been a movie, or I think there was a movie about it, or on that story. So that was good.
All right, today I learned.
Yeah.
Okay, so check out Russian literature, folks.
Yeah.
Matt's company's new tool, Olama.
Olama.
And if you need to take a break for something a little bit more lighthearted, Silo is actually pretty easy to watch.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 3 Body Problem for something light and easy. Yet. No. Are you reading anything right now?
Yes. What am I reading? The Wind Up Bird Chronicle, which I've read. I think this is the 3rd time going through.
I know the author. What's the author's name?
Haruki Murakami. Yeah.
Oh, that is not who I was thinking.
Who also wrote Norwegian Wood, I think most people would know, is kind of a big one. This one's very, very
I think about when I think about running or something like that.
I love that book. And in fact, I've been so close to submitting talks that are like what I think about when I think about. And at the last minute, I just chicken out and pull them. But like what I think about when I think about SSH keys.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just really, really good. We started on
Yeah.
a road trip down to Washington, listening to
Yeah.
together in the car because my wife had never heard it before, and
Right.
it's honestly a classic.
And you were
It's
divorced by the end. No.
no, well, I mean, it is. Yes, it is about divorce. It suffers a little bit in retrospect of like men writing women, I guess,
Mm.
because it's mostly about the male character kind of conjuring up female characters in his
Mm.
life, and it's from his
Mhm.
viewpoint, so it's not that great. It's also a
Mhm.
Japanese man writing it, so there's some of that mixed in, but
Mm.
he's an amazing author.
Mm.
I think there would be only some changes here and there in terms of the way
Yeah.
the story is told, but in terms of actual thinking and
Mhm.
thinking about yourself and the way that you think,
Right.
I think this book is phenomenal. Can't recommend it.
Wow.
It's so good. What
Wow.
about yourself? Are you reading anything right now?
I think it's called Outlive
Okay.
by Peter Attila, something like that.
Science of
It's bas-
longevity.
yeah, yeah. So basically, just how do you live better until you're 80, 90, 100
Oh,
plus years
are
old?
you one of these people? Are we going to put you on ice and keep you around for a while?
I am older.
I think for me, the quantify itself is sort of where I stop. So this is like
Yeah.
attaching metrics to like how many steps did you
Right.
take
Yeah.
today, how much water did you drink, that kind of thing. I'm very
Yeah.
interested in that stuff, but I like monitoring. So
Yeah.
that makes sense. That's really cool.
Yeah. So
Added to the
should we end it? We're about an hour and a half in.
Oh shoot, we are. Yeah, an hour and 15.
Yeah.
I think we started a bit late, but yeah.
Oh yeah, we did start late because I like at 2:10. Like, oh my god,
What's going on?
whoa!
All right, let's see if we can find.
Hey, we got two people. Two people
at
showed
that.
up.
Holy moly.
Hello, two people.
This is probably my wife and my mother.
Exactly. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Find that button.